Hello everyone! Today we're doing something a little different from usual. Since I've been getting so many requests and questions about how I actually make my backgrounds in PA, I'll be here to show you guys exactly how. When making my backgrounds, I first sketch out a very loose idea of how I want it to end up looking, or what elements are needed. You don't have to make it incredibly detailed and intricate. As long as the sketch makes sense to you, and whatever you are envisioning, then that is what matters. The reason for the sketch is to give yourself a basic guideline of what to do, and so you don't go into the editor completely stumped on how to start. Also, you can only accomplish this style of background efficiently with the use of decoration objects. It's possible to use only helpers, but it is really not recommended, especially if you aren't interested in having your computer chug and scream for help before bursting into flames. Speaking of maintaining a good frame rate and not letting your background be the reason for hell unleashing in your computer room, definitely use as least amount of objects as you can. I'm able to go wild with this background because it's just for a cutscene, not for a full level. You can see here that I may be organizing my objects a bit strangely, but there is a method to my madness. The reason I overlap objects in a long row like this is to save up on space. It actually wastes more space to stack your objects vertically in a column. It can be a lot more effective and space saving when working on backgrounds. Trust me, honey, when making these backgrounds, you're going to want to save on space. You can see that I've added something like a haze here. DIY Damien taught me this funky little trick actually. I did that by making a text object, using the vertical bar symbol and rotating it 90 degrees. You then stretch the text object to be massive, like absolutely massive, somewhere at around 8,000 by 80 units or so. This one in particular, I think I used 15,000, I don't know. That is just because I wanted the haze to be stretched out a little bit more. So if you want your haze to be like more stretched out and going even further, just keep making it bigger and bigger. Then at this point, you would have a viable haze that you can use for blurs or gradients. I use these hazes in my backgrounds for something known as atmospheric perspective. It is a naturally occurring phenomena and an element often used in scenic paintings and art. It is when the atmosphere affects how we see objects as they go further off into the distance. It normally indicates that as an object recedes into the distance relative to the viewer, we see the object with reduced clarity, value, and color and saturation. So basically, the further something is off, the more blurry and hazy it will look. So exactly what we would be using the haze for. I find it very pretty, and I like to utilize it often in my backgrounds and cutscenes. It can create the illusion of depth and the distance if that's what you're going for. Just put the haze in between each quote-unquote layer of ground. You can see a good example of my work utilizing this specific technique in another background I've made in the past for a friend. I also like to find myself adding elements of things constantly moving in the background, such as stars, leaves, grass, and so on. It can add a level of more movement and atmosphere to your background or level, and can be more dynamic and pleasing to the eye to look at. Something I've neglected to mention is first, and absolutely first, parent all of your background objects to one master control and have them all be scale parented. That way you can move the background around if necessary and simply use an instant keyframe on the scale timeline to have the entire background pop into existence all at once or disappear all at once. Please be sure to make your first object scale parented to the base and just copy paste that one repeatedly. You don't want to know the suffering I've gone through after making entire backgrounds and realizing I've forgotten to scale parent everything. Never again. When creating foliage for large clumps such as bushes and trees, hexagons are your best friend. When the hexagons overlap and rotate slightly, it can create the appearance as though they are just large clumps of leaves. That way you don't have to individually make every single leaf and branch. Anyway, when not making large leaf clumps, you can use semicircles and text objects. I personally really like using parentheses because they have a bit more of a taper to them than a regular hollow semicircle would. For more foliage, using bold asterisks can be a lifesaver when making flowers. When I put them on this bush, I even squashed and stretched them a little bit as I moved further to the side of the bush to give the illusion that the bush was actually a three-dimensional object. I normally take a non-Euclidean approach when designing a background. I like to make my grounds curved or have a gentle slope to make it softer and rounder, and even more pleasing to the eye. I actually didn't end up curving the fence here, since I ended up liking the stark contrast between it and how curved the ground and tree was. It was really interesting to work with here. Speaking of contrasts and palettes, I choose my color palettes very carefully, and I never ever use a jet black. I add a hint of color to them, like a dark blue, red, or green. I'm really partial to blue. This is easier to look at and can even complement the other colors if you choose wisely. I choose a very dark blue here to contrast the bright pink shade of the sky and flowers. However, if you are making a functional level in PA, I do not suggest using high contrast within the background itself. It's best to instead stick to solid, similar colors while using incredibly contrasting colors for attacks. This can allow the player to not get confused and help them understand what hurts them and what doesn't just a little bit better. Okay, I'm going off on a tangent now, but this is a massive pet peeve of mine. Please don't use incredibly saturated clashing colors for everything. You need to have a level of mutedness or desaturation in the palette you choose. Sometimes palettes can pull off a high saturated theme, but I don't personally vibe with that well. If you're stuck, just look up some palettes online to help you out. Choose something you like and roll with it. For cutscenes, I hide Hal by changing the theme and making them the same color somewhere in the background. Pretty simple, really. Not much else to say here. Not much else to say except that I'm really proud of how this background turned out. You'll be seeing this one a few times in a few cutscenes I'm planning for Heartstrings, so do look out for that. Anyway, that's pretty much all I have to do to create my backgrounds in Project Arrhythmia. I think this one took 3 hours, maybe a little bit longer. I don't know. I don't normally keep track of this stuff. So if you liked the video or want to see more of my hot garbage content, like the video and subscribe to me. You can also check out my Twitter if you are interested in seeing my ramblings, art, and occasional PA previews. That's about it, and I hope you all have a nice day, everyone.